3 days before my son's wedding, my wife casually told me he wasn't mine. For 18 years, I raised him, paid for everything, built a life around a lie. They seated me in the back row like a stranger. But when the bride's father saw me in that back row and went pale, stopping the music mid-ceremony, everyone learned the truth. My name is Norman Keller. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 23 years building a small dairy operation in rural Wisconsin. Nothing fancy, just honest work, early mornings, and the kind of life where a handshake still means something. I married Denise right out of college. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, ambitious in ways I never was. We had Oliver 9 months after the wedding. At least I thought we did. That Tuesday, Denise set down her fork with the kind of deliberate precision that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. We were eating pot roast. I remember because I've been looking forward to it all day, and I never got to finish it. Oliver's wedding is in 5 days, she said, not looking at me. Her voice was flat, like she was reading off a grocery list. I nodded. I know. Got my suit pressed yesterday. She exhaled through her nose. There's something you should know before then. Something I should have told you a long time ago. The way she said it, I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew. He's not yours, Norman. Biologically, I mean. Oliver isn't your son. No tears. No shaking hands. She said it the way you'd mention a doctor's appointment or a change in the weather. Matter of fact. Almost relieved. I didn't move. Didn't speak. My fork was halfway to my mouth, and it just stayed there, suspended, while the words settled into my chest like lead. I thought you should know, she added. Before the wedding. It didn't seem right to keep pretending. Pretending. That word hit harder than the rest. 23 years of pretending. I set the fork down carefully, pushed my chair back, and walked out the back door. Didn't grab my coat. Didn't say a word. I just walked to my truck, climbed in, and sat there in the dark driveway until the cabin light timed out. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the dashboard. I sat there and stared at the edge of the tree line, numb, while the cold seeped in through the windows. The truth was, part of me had suspected for years. The way Oliver looked nothing like me. The way Denise flinched whenever I mentioned family resemblance. The distance that grew wider the older he got. But suspecting and knowing are two different animals. One you can live with. The other tears you apart from the inside. I stayed in that truck for 3 hours. When I finally went back inside, the house was dark and Denise was already in bed. I walked into my office, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in 8 years. Inside was a single piece of paper. A DNA test. Oliver's and mine. I'd known the truth since he was 10 years old. The DNA test had cost me $200 and 3 weeks of sleepless nights. Oliver was 10 years old, playing Little League, losing teeth, still calling me Dad without hesitation. But something had shifted between Denise and me that year. She'd grown distant, secretive. Late-night phone calls she'd taken in the garage. Weekend trips to visit her sister that always seemed to coincide with my busiest seasons at the dairy. One night, I'd found an old photograph in her dresser drawer while looking for batteries. It showed her at some corporate retreat, years before we married, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward him in a way that felt too familiar. I'd ordered the test the next day. Used one of those home kits you can buy online. Swabbed Oliver's cheek while he slept. Told myself I was being paranoid, that I was destroying my own peace of mind over nothing. The results came back on a Thursday. I remember because I just finished the morning milking and found the envelope in the mailbox. I sat in my truck, right there at the end of the driveway, and opened it. Not a match. Probability of paternity, 0%. I'd sat there for an hour, staring at those words, waiting to feel something. Rage, betrayal, grief. But all I felt was numb. Hollow. Here's the thing nobody tells you about moments like that. You don't just lose the future. You lose the past too. Every memory gets rewritten. Every milestone, every proud moment, every time you looked at your kid and thought, he's got my stubborn streak, or he laughed just like I do, all of it becomes a lie. But I didn't confront Denise. Didn't file for divorce. Didn't do anything except fold that paper, put it in an envelope marked emergency documents, and lock it in my filing cabinet. Because Oliver was still my son. Maybe not by blood, but by every other measure that mattered. I'd been there for his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. I taught him to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to change a tire. That didn't stop meaning something just because some lab said we didn't share DNA. So I buried it. I stayed. I kept being his father. And Denise never knew I knew. Until that Tuesday night, when she finally decided to tell me herself. 8 years too late. After I came back inside from sitting in the truck, I went to my office and pulled out that test again. I held it in my hands. The paper worn at the edges from the few times over the years I'd taken it out, stared at it, and put it back. This time, I didn't put it back. I set it on my desk, right where Denise would see it if she walked in. Then I opened my laptop and started making calls. The first one was to Stuart Campbell, my oldest friend and the only lawyer I trusted. He answered on the second ring, groggy. It was past midnight. Norm, what's wrong? Stuart asked. I need your help, I said quietly. And I need you to keep this between us. Stuart showed up at my house at 7 the next morning, before sunrise, carrying 2 cups of gas station coffee and a leather briefcase that had seen better days. He'd been my friend since high school, back when we were both dumb kids who thought we could take on the world. He'd gone to law school. I'd stayed on the farm. But we'd never lost touch. I met him at the barn, away from the house. Denise was still asleep, and I wanted to keep it that way. You look like hell, Stuart said, handing me one of the coffees. Feel worse, I muttered, taking a sip. It was terrible coffee, burned and bitter, but I drank it anyway. Stuart leaned against the fence, watching the cows move slowly across the pasture. He didn't push. That was one thing I'd always appreciated about him. He knew when to wait. Denise told me the truth last night. I finally said. About Oliver. That he's not mine. Stuart's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. You already knew, didn't you? I nodded. 8 years. Found out when he was 10. Never said a word. Why not, he asked. Because he was my son, I said simply. Still is, far as I'm concerned. Blood doesn't change what we build together. Stuart was quiet for a moment, then pulled a notepad from his briefcase. So why call me now? What changed? She told me 3 days before his wedding. I said, my voice flat. Not because she felt guilty, because she wanted to make sure I knew my place. That I wasn't invited to stand with the family. That I'm just the guy who paid the bills. What do you want to do about it? Stuart asked carefully. I took another sip of coffee and stared out at the horizon. Gerald Ramsey, the bride's father. He owns Ramsey Agricultural Holdings. 5 years ago, he was about to lose everything. Banks were calling in loans. Creditors were circling. He came to me, desperate, looking for a private investor. Stuart's eyes narrowed. You didn't. I did, I said. Put up $2.1 million. Took a 49% stake under a silent partnership agreement. Kept him afloat. Saved his reputation. He never asked why I wanted in. He just needed the money. And now? Stuart prompted. Now I need you to review that contract, I said, pulling a folded document from my jacket pocket. Specifically, Clause 14. The one about material disrespect or reputational harm from direct family connections. Stuart unfolded the paper and read it, his expression shifting from curious to impressed. You wrote this. You did, I reminded him. 5 years ago. You told me it was insurance. Just in case. He looked up at me. If you invoke this, you'll have temporary controlling authority over his entire operation. Board votes, contracts, the works. You could shut him down if you wanted. I don't want to shut him down, I said quietly. I just want him to understand who he's disrespecting. And I want everyone at that wedding to see it happen. Stuart folded the paper carefully. When do you want this filed? Tomorrow morning, I said. I want the board notified by Friday afternoon, right before the rehearsal dinner. He nodded slowly. This is going to get ugly, Norm. It already is, I said. I'm just making sure they can't ignore it anymore. The next 3 days passed in a strange fog. I kept working, kept moving, kept pretending everything was normal. Denise didn't bring up the conversation again. She moved through the house like I wasn't there, focused entirely on last-minute wedding details, coordinating with caterers and florists like our marriage hadn't just imploded. Oliver didn't call, didn't text, didn't stop by the dairy, even though he drove past it twice a day on his way to town. Radio silence. My mother, Phyllis, called Wednesday afternoon. She was driving in from Minnesota for the wedding, excited to see her grandson get married. She didn't know. Nobody had told her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be the one to break her heart over the phone. Norman, honey, I'm so proud of Oliver, she said, her voice warm and full of joy. You raised such a good boy. I closed my eyes. Thanks, Mom. Are you giving a speech at the reception? She asked. I bet you've got something wonderful planned. I don't think I'm speaking, Mom, I said carefully. There was a pause. What do you mean? You're the father. Of course you're speaking. It's complicated, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll explain when you get here. She didn't push, but I could hear the confusion in her voice when we said goodbye. Thursday morning, I paid the final wedding invoice. $32,000, all told. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the DJ, the open bar. Every single detail that would make Oliver's day perfect. I transferred the money from our joint account, watching the balance drop, and felt absolutely nothing. Denise walked into the kitchen while I was closing my laptop. She glanced at the screen, then at me. Did you finish the payments? She asked. All done, I said. She nodded once, like I'd just completed a chore. Good. The planner was getting anxious. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just good. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. I'm heading to the barn. The invitation came, Denise said suddenly. I stopped. Turned. What? She picked up an envelope from the counter and held it out. It was cream-colored, expensive cardstock, with elegant lettering. My name was printed on the front. Mr. Norman Keller. Not Dad. Not father of the groom. Just my name. I opened it. The invitation was formal and personal. It listed the ceremony time, the venue, the reception details. At the bottom, in smaller print, was my table assignment. Table 24. The last one, tucked in the corner near the kitchen entrance. I looked up at Denise. You put me at table 24? She crossed her arms. The seating was tight. Nicole's family is large. We had to make adjustments. I'm sitting with people I've never met, I said slowly, scanning the list of names. Next to the bathrooms. It's not personal, Norman, Denise said, her tone clipped. It's just logistics. Logistics, I repeated. Yes, she said firmly. Now, if you're done being dramatic, I have to meet the florist in 20 minutes. She walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with the invitation in my hand. I looked down at it again. Table 24. The back corner. Like I was a distant relative they'd felt obligated to invite, but didn't actually want there. I set the invitation on the counter, walked out to my truck, and drove straight to Stuart's office. Friday afternoon, I was in the barn checking on a sick calf when my phone buzzed. It was Stuart. It's done, he said without preamble. The board received a notification an hour ago. Clause 14 has been invoked. As of 4 p.m. today, you have temporary operational authority over Ramsey Agricultural Holdings, pending board review. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my jeans. How long until Gerald finds out? He already knows, Stuart said. His CFO called him immediately. From what I understand, he's been trying to reach you for the last 30 minutes. I looked at my phone. 7 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Let him wait. Norm, he's going to come looking for you, Stuart warned. Good, I said. Let him come. I'll be at the rehearsal dinner tonight. He can talk to me there. There was a pause on the other end. You're really going through with this? Every step, I said. See you tonight. I hung up and went back to work. The calf needed attention more than Gerald Ramsey's panic did. 20 minutes later, a truck came roaring up my driveway, kicking up gravel and dust. Gerald climbed out, his face red, his jaw tight. I kept working, filling the water trough, not looking up. Norman, Gerald shouted, storming toward me. What the hell do you think you're doing? I finished filling the trough, turned off the hose, and finally looked at him. Taking care of my animals. What are you doing? You know damn well what I'm talking about, Gerald snapped. You invoke Clause 14. You're taking control of my company 3 days before my daughter's wedding. Temporary control, I corrected calmly. And I'm not taking anything. I'm exercising the terms of our agreement. The one you signed 5 years ago. This is insane, Gerald said, running a hand through his hair. What do you want? Money? More equity? Just tell me what you want and let's fix this. I don't want any money, I said, crossing my arms. I want respect. He blinked. What? Your future son-in-law is my son, I said. I raised him. I paid for this wedding. Every cent. And your family, along with mine, decided I belong at table 24. In the back corner. Like I'm nobody. Gerald's expression shifted. Confusion, then understanding, then something close to guilt. Norman, I didn't know about the seating. That was Nicole and Denise. They handled all that. Doesn't matter who handled it, I said. It happened, and now you're going to fix it. How? Gerald asked, his voice strained. You'll figure it out, I said, walking past him toward the barn door. See you at the rehearsal dinner, Gerald. He stood there in my driveway, watching me go, and for the first time in 5 years, he looked like a man who just realized he'd made a terrible mistake. The rehearsal dinner was held at a country club just outside town, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your credit limit. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple suit, no tie. Denise was already there, playing hostess, smiling and laughing with guests like nothing was wrong. Oliver stood near the bar with his groomsmen, a drink in hand, looking relaxed. He saw me walk in, and his smile faltered for just a second before he turned away. Didn't wave, didn't acknowledge me, just turned his back. My mother, Phyllis, spotted me immediately and made her way over. She looked beautiful, wearing a navy dress and her pearl necklace. But her eyes were worried. Norman, honey, what's going on? She asked quietly, taking my arm. Denise has been acting strange, and Oliver hasn't said 2 words to me all evening. It's complicated, Mom, I said. Let's get you a drink first. Before she could respond, Gerald approached. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. His wife, Linda, was beside him, her expression guarded. Norman, Gerald said stiffly. Can we talk? Privately. Anything you need to say, you can say here, I replied evenly. Linda glanced around nervously. Gerald, maybe this isn't the time. It's fine, Gerald interrupted. He turned to me, lowering his voice. I talked to Nicole and Denise. Your seating has been changed. You'll be at table 3, with the family. Table 3, I repeated. Yes, Gerald said. It's right near the head table, close to Oliver and Nicole. I'm sorry about the confusion. My mother looked between us, clearly lost. What confusion? Nothing, Mom, I said, keeping my eyes on Gerald. Just some last-minute adjustments. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. And about the other matter, the business matter, can we discuss terms? Come to an arrangement. There's nothing to discuss, I said calmly. The agreement stands as written. You'll have control back when the board completes their review. Until then, I'm holding the reins. His jaw tightened. You're doing this to humiliate me. No, I said. I'm doing this so you understand what it feels like to have your authority stripped away in front of everyone who matters. Linda's eyes widened. My mother looked at me sharply. Several nearby guests had stopped talking and were watching us now. Gerald opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Denise appeared at my elbow. What's going on here? She demanded, her voice tight. Just clarifying some details, I said, about respect and consequences. Denise looked at Gerald, then at me, and I saw the moment she realized something had shifted, that I wasn't just going to sit quietly in the back and accept whatever scraps they threw my way. Norman, don't make a scene, Denise hissed. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm just standing here. But if you'd like to discuss our situation publicly, I'm happy to oblige. Her face went pale. Gerald took a step back, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. My mother touched my arm. Norman, what is she talking about? I looked at Denise, giving her a chance to come clean. She stared back at me, defiant and silent. Ask your daughter-in-law, I said quietly. She has a lot to explain. My mother didn't let go. She pulled me aside into a quieter corner of the country club, her face set in that expression I'd known since childhood, the one that meant she wasn't leaving without answers. Norman Joseph Keller, she said, using my full name the way she only did when she was serious. What is happening? And don't tell me it's nothing. I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me to be honest, to stand up for myself, to never back down from the truth. She deserved to know. Denise told me 3 days ago that Oliver isn't my biological son, I said quietly. That he never was. The color drained from her face. She gripped my arm, steadying herself. What? I've known for 8 years, Mom, I continued. I found out when he was 10. Did a DNA test. But I stayed. I kept being his father because that's what he needed. 8 years, she whispered. You've known for 8 years and never said anything. What was I supposed to say? I asked. He was my son in every way that mattered. I wasn't going to abandon him because of biology. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. And Denise just told you now, days before his wedding. She wanted me to know my place, I said. That I'm not really family. That's why they put me at table 24. In the back. Like I'm some distant relative they had to invite out of obligation. That's cruel, my mother said, her voice shaking with anger. That's unforgivably cruel. Across the room, Denise was watching us. She must have seen the look on my mother's face, because she started walking over, her expression defensive. Phyllis, Denise said carefully. Is everything all right? My mother turned to her, and I saw something I'd rarely seen before. Cold fury. How dare you? My mother said, her voice low but cutting. How dare you treat my son this way? I don't know what Norman told you, but, Denise started. He told me the truth. My mother interrupted. Something you should have done 23 years ago. People nearby stopped talking. The room was getting quieter, attention shifting toward us. This is not the place, Denise hissed. Then where? My mother demanded. When were you planning to acknowledge what you've done? When were you going to thank the man who raised your son, paid for everything, gave up everything, while you lied to his face for over 2 decades? Oliver appeared then, confusion on his face. Grandma, what's going on? My mother looked at him, and I saw her heart break. Oliver, honey, did you know? Did you know Norman isn't your biological father? Oliver's face went pale. He glanced at Denise, then at me. I've known since I was 16. Mom told me. The words hit like a hammer. 16. He'd known for 2 years. 3 years of growing distant, cold, dismissive. It wasn't confusion or teenage rebellion. It was a choice. And you didn't think I deserved to know you knew? I asked quietly. Oliver shifted uncomfortably. Mom said it would be easier if we just didn't talk about it. Easier for who? My mother asked sharply. Oliver didn't answer. He just stood there, looking between his mother and me. And for the first time I saw him clearly. Not as my son, but as a stranger wearing a familiar face. The wedding morning came with clear skies and perfect weather, the kind of day that makes photographers smile. I hadn't slept much. My mother had stayed up with me until almost 2 in the morning, both of us sitting in the kitchen of my farmhouse, drinking coffee and trying to make sense of the wreckage. Are you going? She'd asked. I'm going, I confirmed. I paid for it. I'm going to see it through. Now, standing in front of the mirror in my bedroom, I adjusted my tie. The same tie I'd worn to Oliver's high school graduation. The cufflinks he'd given me when he got accepted to college were on the dresser. I picked them up, looked at them for a long moment, then set them back down. I wore plain silver ones instead. I drove to the venue alone. My mother had offered a ride with me, but I needed the silence. The ceremony was being held at a restored barn on the edge of the Ramsey property, decorated with white flowers and string lights. Expensive. Elegant. Everything Denise had wanted. I parked in the back lot and walked up the gravel path. Guests were already arriving, dressed in their best, smiling and chatting. I recognized some faces. Neighbors. Business associates. People who'd known me for years. Some of them looked at me strangely, like they weren't sure whether to acknowledge me or not. Word had gotten around. I found my assigned seat. Table 3, just as Gerald had promised. It was closer to the front, but still not where a father should be. I sat down and waited. The ceremony space was arranged in neat rows, chairs facing a wooden arch draped in fabric and flowers. The bridal party was assembling behind a white curtain near the entrance. I could hear voices, nervous laughter, last-minute adjustments. Then I saw him. Oliver, in his tuxedo, standing with his groomsmen. He looked good, confident, happy. He glanced in my direction, and our eyes met for just a second before he looked away. No acknowledgement. No nod. Nothing. My mother arrived and sat beside me, taking my hand. I'm here, she said simply. The music started. A string quartet, playing something classical and romantic. Guests settled into their seats. The officiant took his place under the arch. Then Gerald appeared, walking down the side aisle toward the front. He was supposed to escort Nicole down the aisle, but something was off. He looked pale, shaken. His eyes scanned the crowd, and when they landed on me, he froze. For a long, terrible moment, he just stared, like he was seeing me for the first time, like he'd forgotten I existed and suddenly remembered exactly who I was and what I held over him. The music swelled. Nicole appeared at the entrance in her white dress, radiant and beaming. But Gerald wasn't moving. He was still standing there, staring at me, his face ashen. Someone whispered something to him. He blinked, seemed to shake himself, then turned toward his daughter. But his hands were trembling. The processional began. Nicole started down the aisle, her arm linked with Gerald's. But he was stiff, mechanical, like every step was taking effort. When they reached the front, the officiant smiled and began the ceremony. But Gerald wasn't paying attention. He kept glancing back at me, his jaw tight, his expression strained. And then, just as the officiant asked everyone to be seated, Gerald held up his hand. "Wait," Gerald said, his voice cutting through the space. "Before we begin, there's something that needs to be said." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Nicole's hand went to her mouth. Oliver stood frozen at the altar, his face pale. Gerald cleared his throat, his voice stronger now. 5 years ago, my business was failing. I was weeks away from bankruptcy. Everything I'd built was about to collapse. And then Norman Keller, this man sitting right here, he gestured toward me, stepped in and saved it all. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Heads turned in my direction. He invested over $2 million into Ramsey Agricultural Holdings. Gerald continued. He became a silent partner, asked for nothing in return except discretion. He saved my company, my reputation, and my family's future. And I repaid him by letting him be treated like he didn't matter. Denise stood abruptly from her seat. "Gerald, this is not." "Sit down," Gerald said sharply. It was the first time I'd heard him speak to anyone that way. Denise's mouth snapped shut, and she slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Gerald turned to face me directly. "Norman raised the man standing at this altar. He paid for every part of this wedding. And he was seated in the back like a stranger because I didn't have the courage to stand up for what was right. That ends now." He walked down from the front, past the rows of stunned guests, until he stood directly in front of me. Then, to everyone's shock, he extended his hand. "I'm sorry," Gerald said, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserve better. From all of us." I stood slowly and shook his hand. Firm, steady, the handshake of two men who understood respect. My mother squeezed my other hand, tears streaming down her face. Gerald turned back to the crowd. "If anyone here has a problem with Norman Keller being treated as family, you can leave now. This wedding doesn't happen without him. None of this happens without him." Silence. No one moved. Then, slowly, people began to stand. First, it was my mother. Then Stuart and his wife. Then some of the dairy suppliers I'd worked with for years. Then Gerald's own business partners. Men who'd benefited from my investment whether they knew it or not. Within moments, nearly half the guests were standing. Not in protest. In solidarity. Oliver stood at the altar, watching this unfold, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been shame. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally managed, "Dad, Don't," I said quietly. "Not now. Not here." Denise sat rigid in her seat, her face flushed with humiliation. A few of her relatives stood beside her, but most remained seated, uncertain. Gerald returned to the front. "We'll continue," he said to the officiant. "But first, I want to make something clear. Norman Keller is family. Anyone who treats him otherwise answers to me." The ceremony resumed, but everything had changed. The air felt different. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. The reception was awkward, to say the least. I stayed for the first hour, mostly for my mother's sake. People approached me cautiously, some apologizing, others just offering quiet nods of respect. Gerald made sure I was seated at table 1, right next to his family, though that just made the tension more obvious. Oliver tried to approach me twice. Both times, I politely excused myself. I wasn't ready for whatever apology or explanation he'd rehearsed. Maybe I never would be. Denise avoided me entirely, staying on the opposite side of the venue, surrounded by the few relatives who still supported her. I caught her staring at me once, her expression unreadable. Anger? Regret? I didn't care enough to figure it out. Around 8 p.m., I found my mother and told her I was leaving. "You did good today, honey," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," I said. "You heading back to the hotel?" "In a bit," she said. "I want to make sure people remember what happened here today." I smiled despite everything. My mother, ever the fighter. Stuart walked me to my truck. "Hell of a day," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. "Hell of a day. What are you going to do about the business?" Stuart asked. "You still have operational control for at least another month." I'm not interested in running his company, I said. I just needed him to understand consequences. I'll sign the control back over in a few weeks, once the point is made. Stuart nodded. And Denise? Divorce papers will be filed Monday morning, I said. The house is in my name. She can find somewhere else to live. Cold, Stuart observed. Fair, I corrected. I drove home as the sun set, the sky painted in oranges and purples. When I pulled up to the farmhouse, everything was quiet, peaceful. Mine. I sat on the porch with a beer and looked out over the land I'd worked for decades. Somewhere out there, Oliver was dancing at his reception, celebrating a future I'd paid for, but wasn't really part of. And for the first time in 23 years, I felt free. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Denise got nothing except what the law required, which wasn't much given the prenup Stuart had insisted I get all those years ago. Oliver reached out a few times, but I kept my distance. Maybe someday we'd find a way back to each other. Maybe not. Gerald and I maintained our business relationship, though it was purely professional now. He'd learned his lesson. So had I. My mother visited often, helping me turn the farmhouse into something that felt less like a museum of broken memories and more like a home. And one evening, sitting on that same porch, watching the sunset, I realized something. I'd spent 2 decades being someone's father, someone's husband, someone's partner. I'd poured everything into roles that were built on lies. Now, I was just Norman, and that was enough.